The words "license suspended" stared back at me from the official letter, each character feeling like a personal betrayal. After 15 years of dedicated service at Boston Memorial Hospital, my career had been reduced to a 2-page notice citing professional misconduct and questionable medical decisions. I placed the letter carefully on my desk, next to the framed photo of my husband Mark and me at my medical school graduation. The irony of that happy moment wasn't lost on me. His mother had been there too, beaming proudly at her son's new doctor wife. If only I'd known then what that approval would cost. My name is Dr. Emily Chen, and at 38, I'd built a reputation as one of Boston Memorial's most respected emergency medicine physicians. That was before Victoria Sterling, my mother-in-law and newly appointed hospital board member, decided I wasn't worthy of her son after all. Dr. Chen, Jenny, one of our veteran nurses, poked her head into my office. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She'd obviously been crying. The staff, we've all heard. This isn't right. I managed a small smile. No, it's not. But it's not over either. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Dr. Sterling was bragging about it in the boardroom, said she'd finally dealt with the problem. We all know what she's doing. Emily, this isn't about patient care. No, it wasn't. This was about control. About a woman who couldn't bear the thought of her precious son being married to someone who wouldn't bow to her influence. The fact that Mark and I had been happily married for 10 years. That I'd built my own successful career without her help. It ate at her. Jenny, I said carefully, those patient files Victoria claims show my misconduct. Did she access them herself? Jenny's eyes widened slightly. Yes, she's been coming in late at night, going through records. We thought it was just normal board oversight. But, I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. And did she use her own login credentials? No, Jenny replied, understanding dawning on her face. She's been using Dr. Morrison's. He's been on sabbatical, but his access is still active. Exactly what I'd suspected. Victoria's arrogance had made her sloppy. She'd left a trail, thinking no one would dare question her actions. That evening, I sat in our home office, surrounded by copies of patient records I'd carefully documented over the years. Mark found me there, still reviewing files hours after dinner. He said softly, Mom called. She wants us to come over tomorrow. Says she has something important to discuss. I looked up at my husband, this kind, brilliant man who'd somehow emerged decent despite Victoria's toxic influence. I assume she wants to celebrate destroying my career? He sat heavily in the chair across from me. I don't understand why she's doing this. You're an amazing doctor. The patients love you. The staff respects you. But I don't defer to her. I finished. I don't ask her permission for career decisions or consult her about our personal lives. That's what this is really about. Mark ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I'll talk to her. Make her understand. No. I cut him off gently. Don't you see? That's exactly what she wants, to force you to choose between us. To prove she still controls you. He was quiet for a moment, studying the papers spread across my desk. These patient records. What are you looking for? I hesitated. What I'd discovered in my review of the files was bigger than just Victoria's vendetta against me. Much bigger. Your mother didn't just access patient records illegally, I said carefully. She modified them, changed treatment dates, altered medication records. But she made a mistake. She didn't know about the backup systems I put in place years ago. Mark's face paled. She tampered with medical records? To make it look like I'd made dangerous decisions. Yes, but in doing so, she revealed something else, something that's been happening at Boston Memorial for years. I pulled out a specific set of files, cases that had always bothered me, but that I'd never been able to connect until now. Victoria's tampering had inadvertently exposed a pattern that had been hidden in plain sight. These patients, I explained, spreading out the files, all came through the ER with similar symptoms. All were transferred to the private wing under the care of specific doctors, and all had their original diagnoses and treatment plans mysteriously altered. Mark leaned forward, his medical training kicking in as he scanned the records. These changes, they're all pushing expensive treatments, unnecessary procedures. Exactly. Your mother was so focused on discrediting me that she didn't realize she was exposing a massive insurance fraud scheme, one that's been operating at Boston Memorial for at least a decade. The implications hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just about my career anymore. This was about systematic fraud that had potentially affected hundreds of patients. How long have you known? Mark asked quietly. I've suspected something was wrong for years. Certain cases didn't add up. Treatments seemed excessive. But I could never prove anything. The records always seemed to support the decisions, even when my notes said otherwise. I pulled out another file, this one containing records of my own documentation over the years. I started keeping separate records after the first few suspicious cases, private notes, copies of original diagnoses, even recordings of some patient consultations. I knew something wasn't right, but I never imagined that my mother would accidentally expose it all. Mark finished. He was silent for a moment. Then, what are you going to do? I smiled for the first time that day. First, we're going to your mother's house tomorrow. I want to hear exactly what she has to say about my suspension. And then I'm going to meet with someone who's very interested in insurance fraud at major hospitals. Someone Victoria would never suspect, I know. The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to Dr. Sarah Martinez at the State Medical Board, not about my suspension, but about a pattern of suspicious billing practices I'd documented. The second call was to FBI Special Agent David Chin, no relation, who specialized in healthcare fraud investigations. He'd been looking into several hospitals in the Boston area, but hadn't been able to crack the careful documentation that covered up the scheme. This is exactly what we needed, he said after I explained what I'd found. But are you sure you want to do this? Your mother-in-law tried to destroy my career to maintain her control over her son, I finished. She needs to learn that actions have consequences. That afternoon, Mark and I drove to Victoria's massive colonial home in the suburbs. She opened the door wearing her usual perfect smile, every gray hair expertly colored and styled. Mark, darling, she cooed, embracing him before turning her cold eyes to me. Emily. I suppose you've heard the news about my suspension? I kept my voice steady. Yes, I have. Well, come in, she said, ushering us into her formal living room. We need to discuss your future. Or rather, lack thereof. I sat quietly as she launched into her carefully prepared speech about how this was really for the best, how I could find something more suitable to do with my time, how Mark deserved a wife who would prioritize family over career. After all, she concluded with a smirk, you'll never practice medicine again. I've made sure of that. Perhaps now Mark will finally see reason and end this unfortunate marriage. I felt Mark tense beside me, but I squeezed his hand gently. Stay calm. Let her talk. Actually, Victoria, I said pleasantly, I should thank you. She blinked, clearly thrown by my response. Thank me? Yes. Your thorough review of my patient files has been incredibly helpful. In fact, I have a meeting tomorrow morning with some people who are very interested in what you found. What are you talking about? Her perfect composure cracked slightly. The FBI's Healthcare Fraud Division, for one. The State Medical Board, for another. They're particularly interested in the pattern of altered records and inflated billing you accidentally exposed while trying to discredit me. The color drained from Victoria's face. You're lying. You can't prove anything, can't I? I pulled out my phone, showing her the access logs Jenny had provided. Every time you used Dr. Morrison's credentials to access and modify records, it was logged. Every change you made was tracked. And in trying to make me look bad, you revealed something much bigger, didn't you? Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for her wine glass. You have no idea what you're talking about. The board will never believe you over me. The board won't have a choice, I replied calmly. Not with the evidence I've collected, not just about your tampering, but about the entire scheme. Did you really think I wouldn't keep my own records? That I wouldn't document every suspicious case that came through my ER? Mark sat forward, his voice tight with anger. How long, Mom? How long have you known about the fraud? Victoria's mask finally cracked completely. You don't understand. The hospital needed the revenue. Insurance companies keep cutting reimbursements, costs keep rising. We did what we had to do, by ordering unnecessary procedures? By altering patient records to justify excessive treatments? I shook my head. How many people were harmed by this, Victoria? How many patients underwent procedures they didn't need? No one was harmed, she snapped. They got excellent care, care they didn't need, Mark interrupted. Care that could have caused complications, that put them at risk unnecessarily. Also, the hospital could bill their insurance for more money. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. The FBI will be executing search warrants tomorrow morning. They'll seize the hospital's records, both sets of them. The real ones and the altered ones. Victoria's face went from pale to ashen. You can't do this. You'll destroy everything. No, I corrected her. You did that when you decided to abuse your power. When you thought you could use your position to control everyone around you. As we walked to the door, she called out desperately, Mark, please. You can't let her do this. I'm your mother. Mark turned back to her, his expression sad but determined. And Emily is my wife. The woman I love. The doctor who actually cares about her patients. You did this to yourself, Mom. The next morning, I watched from across the street as FBI agents entered Boston Memorial. Victoria arrived shortly after, only to be met by agents at the door. Her perfect composure crumbled as they escorted her inside. Jenny called me an hour later. They're going through everything, she reported. Dr. Morrison just confessed to giving Dr. Sterling his login credentials. Said she threatened his position if he didn't cooperate. How many others? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. At least 6 doctors involved in the scheme directly. More who knew but stayed quiet. The private wing is shut down completely while they investigate. Over the next few weeks, the full scope of the fraud became clear. For over a decade, certain doctors had been ordering unnecessary tests and procedures, altering records to justify the treatments, and billing insurance companies for millions in fraudulent claims. Victoria, as board member and chief of surgery, had been one of the architects of the scheme. Her attempt to discredit me had inadvertently exposed the careful documentation system they'd created to cover their tracks. The state medical board not only reinstated my license, but commended my documentation of suspicious cases. The FBI used my records as a roadmap to unravel the entire conspiracy. 3 months after that evening at Victoria's house, I sat in a federal courthouse, preparing to testify about what I'd discovered. Mark squeezed my hand as Victoria was led and wearing handcuffs, a far cry from her usual elegant appearance. She looked older, defeated. When her eyes met mine, I saw something I'd never seen before, respect, tinged with fear. The trial lasted 2 weeks. In the end, Victoria and 5 other doctors were convicted of healthcare fraud and conspiracy. The hospital's reputation was severely damaged, but new leadership was brought in to rebuild properly. I was offered the position of Chief of Emergency Medicine at Boston Memorial's reorganized administration. I accepted on one condition, that we implement rigorous oversight and documentation systems to prevent future fraud. Mark supported me completely, though the situation with his mother strained him. We visited her once in prison, where she finally offered something close to an apology. I thought I was protecting the hospital, she said. But really, I was just drunk on power. The ability to control things, to make decisions without anyone questioning me. That's why you hated me so much, I realized. Because I questioned things. Because I kept records and documented inconsistencies. She nodded slowly. You were a threat to the system we'd built. And to my control over Mark. I couldn't allow either. A year after Victoria's conviction, I stood in Boston Memorial's ER, watching my team work. The hospital was different now, more transparent, more focused on patient care than profits. My detailed documentation system had become the standard across all departments. Mark joined me during his break from surgery, wrapping an arm around my waist. Mom's parole hearing is next month, he said quietly. I nodded. We'd discussed this. What do you think she'll do if they release her? Move to Florida with my aunt, he replied. She knows she can't stay in Boston. Her reputation here is destroyed, along with her power. I added, that's what will hurt her the most. He smiled slightly. You know what's ironic? If she hadn't tried to destroy your career, hadn't gotten sloppy trying to discredit you, the fraud might never have been discovered. Sometimes people's worst impulses lead to their downfall, I said. She was so focused on controlling us that she lost control of everything. Later that evening, as I reviewed patient files, properly documented and transparently stored, I found myself thinking about power and control. Victoria had spent years building her empire of influence, never realizing that true power comes from using your position to help others, not control them. The photo from my medical school graduation still sat on my desk, but now it was joined by another, a news clipping about the fraud conviction and the doctor whose careful documentation had exposed it all. Victoria had tried to end my medical career to maintain her control. Instead, she'd helped me remake the hospital into something better, something honest. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies, it's about building something stronger from the ruins of their schemes.